Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today. For all of you who are watching this, Carrie is a distinguished former sergeant with the San Diego Police Department, and you received the Distinguished Diversity Award from the city of San Diego for your work in law enforcement and furthering those initiatives and priorities. How important is really understanding that implicit bias can affect our decision making?
Understanding how our brain works, and thereby understanding how the citizens' brains are working, just gives us more tools, like the ones that we carry on our belt, but they're up in our head, to be able to work effectively with the public.
By sharing examples that, let's just say, aren't specific policing examples, but they're examples of bias, whether it's gender bias or racial bias out in the world, how would you say that's relevant to policing?
Well, we're people first before we're cops. And one of the things that I love about BiasSync is the fact that it's non-confrontational, it's non-judgmental. It's like, look, well, we're all human beings, and our brains are all operating with these biases that we may not even be aware of.
There's been a lot of attention recently on obviously policing and incidents in particular with people of color, in particular with Black individuals. And I sense that there's potentially some inherent resistance to anything that's diversity training focused or unconscious bias focused, because a lot of police officers and organizations feel under attack. So in that context, how would you frame the importance of this work and training?
The training that law enforcement officers are going through with BiasSync is critical, and here's why. The purpose of the BiasSync training is to let them know this is how humans behave. It's not about whether or not you're a law enforcement officer. The part about being a law enforcement officer is that we are tasked and held to a standard to be able to do law enforcement, to be able to serve the community, but show respect to people and to show empathy to people. And you don't have to agree with how they're reacting or how they're acting, but you have to understand, okay, they're going through this, and I get why someone might be doing that. And when you can have that empathy, when you can have that understanding, you can show that respect. That's what we need to do as law enforcement officers. And the cool thing about the BiasSync training is it helps us understand what's going on in our unconscious part of our mind and the subconscious and the conscious, so that we can wrap everything together and be able to perform our jobs better. And then you take this BiasSync assessment. And there's some people that they don't like the results. And so they begin to question the science. And what I did is I dove into, okay, where did these assessments that BiasSync is using, before I'm going to recommend anything to any law enforcement agency or any law enforcement officer, is this assessment valid? Is the science behind it valid? And I found that it was. And I feel 100% comfortable recommending BiasSync, because I know that the assessments that they're using, the background, the experts that they use, I've talked to them. I've looked at the research studies. So I feel completely comfortable with the assessments. Now, that doesn't mean you're necessarily, when you take this, necessarily going to like the results. But every cop I've ever talked to, and I've talked to thousands across the country as I've done training over 30 years, everybody comes into it with the same goal. They want to make a difference. And the best way to be able to do that at that high level is what Socrates said: know thyself. When we know ourselves, when we examine our lives, we become better people.